Mom chose my step-siblings over me and demanded that I share my late father's college fund, or leave within a week. Before I dive into every detail of what happened, let me give you some background on my life. I'm a 17-year-old girl living with my 43-year-old mother, my stepdad, and my 2 step-siblings. I have one stepbrother, whom I call Jackson, a guy just a year older than me, and a younger stepsister, Emma, who is 2 years my junior. We all attend the same high school, yet our social circles never overlap, and our interactions have always felt distant and superficial. My mother married my stepdad after a long 5-year relationship. Although their wedding took place 3 years ago, our blended family has been living together for a solid 6 years, making the ceremony more of a formality than a true new beginning. As for my biological father, he passed away when I was extremely young, so much so that my memories of him are hazy and few. My parents had never married, and my dad's family never approved of my mom because, back in their small town, she had a reputation for being a bit of a party girl and was considered scandalous. They only lived together briefly to avoid his family cutting him off, and after being diagnosed with late-stage leukemia at the tender age of 27, he only had enough time to set up an education fund for me, ensuring that I wouldn't face financial hardship after his death and sparing my mother from the relentless pressure to work overtime. I've known about this fund ever since his lawyer explained it to me in my early childhood. The lawyer has been the guardian of these funds until I turned 18, at which point I'd finally have full control. After my father passed, it was just my mom and me trying to manage life. Then, when I was around 8 years old, my stepdad entered our lives, and eventually, all of us moved in together. My mom even left the town we once called home because the memories of where she and my dad had met were too painful to bear. I never got to meet my paternal grandparents since they were never interested in having a relationship with me, although we occasionally visit my maternal grandparents, who are kind enough but not closely knit with us. When I joined my stepdad's family, I had enormous hopes of finally belonging to a big, loving family. I envisioned warm gatherings, shared laughter, and genuine closeness. Unfortunately, the reality was far from my dreams. Even though no one ever treated me with outright cruelty, there was always an unmistakable energy. Something off in the way everyone interacted. Despite living under the same roof, we functioned more as glorified roommates rather than a unified family unit. I tried reaching out to my step-siblings and even my stepdad, but their lack of genuine enthusiasm left me feeling isolated. In contrast, my mother was embraced wholeheartedly by everyone, receiving warm, familial treatment that I never experienced. Perhaps this stark difference stemmed from my stepdad's ex-wife, a person I never met yet who, from every account I heard, was a notorious gold digger who had left him nearly penniless after their bitter divorce. Not only had she abandoned her responsibilities by taking off with a new lover shortly after the split, but her departure forced my stepdad to rebuild his life from scratch and raise his children on his own. In that context, my mother, who was the exact opposite of his ex, seemed like the perfect savior for his new family dynamic. But sadly, that very situation made it easy for them to sideline me, making me feel like nothing more than an afterthought. I couldn't pinpoint a single moment when this exclusion was overt, but the overall vibes and energy always told me that I was not truly part of the family. Oddly enough, there were moments when I even felt a tinge of jealousy, watching how my mother finally seemed to have found her people, while I remained forever on the outside. Over time, that feeling of being left behind festered into deep resentment. I never voiced these feelings because they seemed trivial and petty compared to the grand scheme of family life. Still, despite my internal struggles, I pretended to be content with the situation. Before we move on, please remember to subscribe, like, and share this video to support my channel and help spread my story further. Now, turning to the events of a few days ago, a turning point that has shaken the foundation of my already fragile family life. I had been diligently researching colleges for several weeks, since graduation loomed just a few months away and the application deadlines were fast approaching. I wasn't overly anxious about the money aspect because my mom had always reassured me that there was a substantial sum reserved just for my education, a legacy from my late father. However, a few days back, my mother sat me down for what she claimed was an extremely important conversation. With a tone that left little room for negotiation, she revealed that my stepdad had not been able to save enough money for his own children's college expenses. In her eyes, the solution was simple yet heart-wrenching. I was expected to share the funds my father had left for me with my step-siblings, especially since Jackson had already taken a gap year and was planning to start college concurrently with me. The conversation was unsettling, as it pitted my right to financial independence against my duty to support a family I never truly felt part of. Legally, my mother had no authority over these funds. My father's will explicitly stated that I was the sole controller of the money once I turned 18, and there was no mention of sharing it with anyone else. Frankly, I had no desire to divide what was meant solely for my future. For starters, I never really considered my step-siblings to be my true family, an opinion I suspect they might share. Even if there were funds left over after I covered my college expenses, I intended to use that money to secure my own future, perhaps by renting my own apartment until I was able to earn a steady income. I had already managed to save a decent amount of money by attending public school instead of a costly private institution, and I had maintained excellent grades, hoping to snag a scholarship to help offset future college costs. As I approached adulthood, the prospect of giving up a portion of my financial legacy to those who had never truly supported or welcomed me into their lives simply did not sit well with me. I told my mother, as calmly as I could muster, that I would not be sharing these funds. I explained that if Jackson needed money for college, millions of other students have managed with student loans. My response, though logical, infuriated her. She immediately labeled me as selfish, and while I acknowledged that I was indeed looking out for my own future, I saw nothing wrong with that. Instead of escalating into a heated argument, I stood firm and admitted, with a sense of reluctant honesty, that yes, I was being selfish, and that I believed it was perfectly acceptable given the circumstances. I made it clear that I did not consider my step-siblings as family, and that should not obligate me to sacrifice my future for their benefit. This candid admission sent my mother into a furious tirade. She began screaming, treating my honest words as if they were a grave criminal offense. It took me several heart-stopping seconds to process the sheer intensity of her reaction. She was literally losing her mind over the fact that I dared to say the truth about my feelings. The double standards were glaring. For years, I had been treated as an outsider, ignored or sidelined by everyone in the house, yet suddenly I was forced to accept these people as family solely because they had always accepted my mother without question. I attempted to speak to her in a measured, calm tone, hoping that reason might prevail, but she was beyond listening, calling me ungrateful and lashing out with accusations. I let her vent, telling her that no amount of screaming would alter my decision, and that such behavior only served to drive me further away from any notion of familial unity. After my steadfast response, my mother's outburst subsided slightly, leading me to believe that perhaps we could finally engage in a rational conversation. I naively thought that I could express my feelings and maybe even find common ground. But I soon realized that in our household, my feelings were irrelevant compared to the happiness of my mother, my stepdad, and my step-siblings. Once she had calmed down, she delivered an ultimatum. I had exactly 1 week to reconsider my stance, after which she would have no choice but to kick me out of the house. At first I thought she must be joking. It seemed utterly preposterous that my own mother would give me such an ultimatum. But she was dead serious. With my 18th birthday approaching in less than a month, she reminded me that once I was legally an adult, she would have no obligation to let me live under her roof any longer. I was now forced to choose between surrendering a part of my future by sharing the college fund and remaining in a home where I had never truly belonged. I was deeply insulted by this demand. It was as if my very existence was being undermined simply because I refused to support step-siblings who had never made me feel like a part of their lives. As she left the room, her words echoed in my mind, leaving me to sit there, stunned and processing the magnitude of her betrayal. That very day, I resolved that I would leave this toxic environment no matter what the personal cost. I began reaching out to my friends, explaining the dire situation and asking for help in finding an apartment of my own, as I planned to move out by my 18th birthday. I explained every detail of my mother's ultimatum, and I reassured myself that once I turned 18, the funds would be mine to control. Yes, I would have to budget carefully and choose my college major with extreme caution, but that was a small price to pay for freedom from a home where I was treated as an afterthought. I realized that I hadn't been overthinking things all along. In fact, I might have even underestimated the severity of the situation, as nothing could have prepared me for this betrayal. A few days later, a friend informed me that she had spoken with her cousin, who was also in the process of applying to the same colleges as I was, as we shared similar academic interests. This cousin, who was already planning to rent an apartment in order to establish her independence from day one, suggested that I reach out to her. The idea was that if we ended up attending the same college, we could share an apartment and support each other as we embarked on this new chapter of our lives. The notion immediately resonated with me. I quickly contacted her, and we hashed out all the details. I explained my entire predicament, and her empathetic, understanding nature reassured me that I would get along well with her. That part of my plan was soon in place. The only remaining challenge was to find a temporary living situation until college commenced, several months away, yet long enough to cause significant distress. Thankfully, my friends rallied around me, offering me a place to stay until I was ready to move into our new apartment. Even though the plan was risky and far from perfect, I was willing to take the chance. Living with my friends, who had shown nothing but compassion after the heart-wrenching confrontation with my mother, was a far better option than continuing to endure the constant humiliation at home. The treatment I received in that household was more degrading than mere harsh words. It was as if every time I entered a room, everyone would instantly fall silent and avert their eyes, treating me as if I were a repulsive, unwanted presence. The side eyes, the whispered comments, and the blatant avoidance made it feel as though I had done something irreparably wrong. I felt the overwhelming urge to run away, to escape the constant sting of rejection. It took me some time to arrange a stable plan for myself, but once my friends confirmed they could take me in, I knew that I would soon be free from that oppressive environment. The day finally came when my mother approached me once again to ask if I had reconsidered my decision. This time, I stood even firmer. I told her, without a trace of hesitation, that I had not changed my mind. In fact, I was preparing to leave for good. I explained that the way she and her family had treated me over the past week was nothing short of psychotic, and I could no longer tolerate such abuse. I informed her that I had already made arrangements with friends to take me in until I could begin college and fully cut ties with this environment. I made it clear that I never wanted to see her again, and that she was free to kick me out, because, in truth, I was already planning my escape. Her reaction was swift and vicious. She erupted in another tirade, labeling me as a selfish, ungrateful brat unworthy of her house. I left that confrontation with a strange sense of relief. In the solitude of my room, I began to reflect on how, ever since my mother married my stepdad, my life had taken a downward spiral. Despite my efforts to be happy for her and to suppress my own pain, it had become glaringly obvious that she cared more for her new family than for me. The way she had treated me made me feel worthless, and I vowed that I would not let this injustice go unanswered. As soon as I was safely out of that house, I decided to expose her true colors to the world. I went online and crafted a detailed post about the incident, the way she had screamed at me for refusing to contribute to my step-sibling's college fund, her blatant double standards, and how she had consistently sidelined me in favor of her new family. I poured out my frustration and heartbreak, explaining that the funds were meant solely for me, as dictated by my late father's will, and that expecting me to share them was utterly unjust. I acknowledged that if my step-siblings had ever treated me with kindness, perhaps I might have reconsidered, but they never had. I released that post without hesitation, fully expecting the fallout. As anticipated, my mother soon bombarded me with messages, accusing me of ruining her life because the post had been shared widely among her social circle. People, always eager for gossip, seized upon the story, and it quickly spread like wildfire. My mother, who once enjoyed popularity among her friends, was now the subject of heated discussions and scandal. She tried calling me repeatedly, but I ignored every call and text. I was overwhelmed with misery, and though I had hoped that posting my truth would alleviate some of my pain, her subsequent messages only deepened my regret. I could sense her anguish through every word. She claimed that she had raised me to be kind and compassionate, and that she never expected me to behave so vindicatively. At one point, she even declared that if my father were still alive, he would be utterly disappointed by the malicious side of me that she now saw. That accusation hit me hard, forcing me to question whether I had done something unforgivable. I started to second-guess myself, and in that moment of uncertainty, I turned to all of you for guidance. I needed help sorting through my tangled emotions and deciding whether my refusal to share the funds and my subsequent online posts were justified, or if perhaps I was being manipulated into rejecting my family even further. Update 1. I want to start by saying thank you so much for all the kind messages and overwhelming support. Your words have meant the world to me and have given me the strength to see my situation more clearly. There was a moment when I almost considered giving my mother another chance, clinging to the hope that she might be capable of goodness, but then I recalled all the hurtful things she had done. What kind of mother behaves in such a cold and calculated manner? Realizing that she was not the caring person I once believed her to be, I made the decision to block her from contacting me. I couldn't risk her manipulative attempts to guilt me into taking down my post or apologizing on her own terms. I want that post to remain up until she offers a sincere apology, because it serves as a testament to the truth of what happened. I know exactly where I am now, thanks to my friend's mother who informed her of my new address, and I will consider her silence a sign that she truly doesn't care about me, despite her concern for her own reputation. Update 2. It has now been 2 weeks since I moved in with my friend and finally left my stepfather's house for good. In the days following my post, I had absolutely no contact with anyone from my family. I even went to school, and though I briefly encountered Emily, she shot me a disdainful look and pretended I wasn't even there, an all too familiar behavior that I had endured for the past 8 years. They've mastered the art of ignoring me, and apparently, that expertise has only grown over time. The final straw came last evening when my mother visited me. She arrived carrying a large, black plastic bag, the kind typically used for trash, and proceeded to dump it in my living room. Inside were all the remnants of my belongings that I had hastily packed into a duffel bag when I left the house. The sheer disrespect of using a trash bag to handle my possessions was almost too much to bear, and it hurt even more when she nonchalantly scattered them on the floor, leaving me to pick them up. My friend and her parents witnessed the entire debacle and were absolutely scandalized by my mother's behavior. They didn't hesitate to confront her, insisting that as my only daughter, I deserved compassion rather than such cruelty. Their impassioned defense of me escalated into a heated exchange. My mother retorted by saying they had no right to criticize her parenting, especially since they were sheltering what she called a delinquent. I couldn't help but laugh inwardly at that absurdity. I've always been a dedicated student, not the troublemaker she claimed I was. I'm incredibly grateful to my friend and her family for standing up for me. It felt like, for the first time ever, someone was truly fighting for my rights and dignity. After that confrontation, my mother stormed off in a huff, and I sincerely hope that she won't dare show up again. I'm ready to move on and start a new chapter of my life, one without the endless drama and heartache she brings. Update 3. Hey folks, it's been a while since I last updated you. I've been off the grid for a couple of months, fully immersed in the college application process. I was laser focused on getting into a good school with a scholarship, and I worked relentlessly to achieve my goals. I'm thrilled to share that all my hard work has paid off. I've been accepted to my first choice college. I'm still following the plan I set in motion a few months back. My friend's cousin, who was also applying to the same colleges, managed to get accepted as well, and we've decided to rent an apartment together once we start school. She's an incredibly sweet person, and the fact that she's related to a close friend of mine is just the cherry on top. I get to keep in touch with everyone I care about while building a new, independent life. The past few months have been emotionally exhausting, but my friends have been my rock throughout this tumultuous journey. I know that many people with difficult family situations depend on their friends for emotional support, and while I had tried to avoid that dependency before, I now realize how blessed I am to have such a solid network. It's both strange and heartwarming that literal strangers online have offered more genuine support than my own mother ever did. In fact, since I moved out, she hasn't even bothered to text me once. Even after I unblocked her, she's chosen silence. That speaks volumes about how little I seem to mean to her. Yet, thanks to the constant encouragement from you all and my steadfast friends, I've learned to have faith in myself. I'm now looking forward to a fresh start, leaving behind all the pain and drama of my past, and I'm incredibly excited for the promising future ahead. Every step of this journey has been painful and complicated, yet I feel empowered by the truth and by the support of those who truly care. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Your support means everything to me as I continue to rebuild my life and move forward into a brighter, freer future.